Good morning. Thank you for joining. We'll just wait for everyone to get logged in and we'll start shortly. If you wouldn't mind just dropping me a comment if you can see and hear us okay, that would be great. And likewise, if you do have a question for Charlotte, Mark or myself, you should have a Q&A box just on the bottom of your screen there, and please do ask away and we'll come to those at the end. Thank you, Nikki. Thanks for confirming. That's great. Okay, good morning. It's 10:30, so let's get started. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Hayley and I'm the Director of Sales at Neves and Neat. And today our webinar is focusing on attracting talent, and it's all things graduates, apprentices and interns. So we are going to be starting today by talking about various ways your business can support graduates, apprentices and interns at this very important point in their career. And I'm delighted today to be joined by Marc Rothera, Business Development Manager at Anglia Ruskin University, and Charlotte Steggall, Early Careers and Talent Acquisition Specialist at AVEVA. Good morning to you both.
Morning.
Morning. So Charlotte, could I head over to you very quickly for a short introduction about yourself and the role that you do?
Sure. So I manage globally. I'm at AVEVA. We're a software company, not the insurance company. And I manage our early careers options. So our graduates, our apprentices, our interns and everything in between globally. And I've been doing that since about February. And my background has been in lots of different like youth and skills and equality and education routes. And I've known that I knew that I wanted to do this role for a very long time, but I knew that when I came to it, I wanted to do it correctly, and I wanted to make sure that everybody had good opportunities, and I was bringing good knowledge into the role. So basically, I'm bringing together everything I've learned so far.
Amazing, thank you. Sounds very interesting. And Mark, over to you.
Yeah, I'm Mark and I'm with Anglia Ruskin University. I work for the Degrees at Work team. So we're a kind of cross-faculty team, a business unit, and my role is primarily to help employers set up degree apprenticeship programs using the suite of programs that we have available. And my background, I kind of similar to Charlotte in a sense. I'm originally qualified as a youth worker, did a good period of time with the full gamut of working with young people, from detached youth work through to hard to reach, and a stint in the Connections service for those who might remember that. Yep. And then moved into higher education, did a decade of outreach and recruitment for the university. So a lot of helping people with applying to university and reaching out into schools and that side of things. And then in the last couple of years moved over to the degree apprenticeship team and have been business facing, helping people with understanding the apprenticeships in general and specifically the products that we offer here at ARU. Okay,
perfect. Well, today we will all be diving into the very important topic of different options available to support early careers. And in addition to that, Mark will be focusing on degree apprenticeships. Charlotte will be talking to us about what AVEVA offer for their early careers. And lots more discussion points, which I'm sure you will find interesting. So with that in mind, Charlotte, can I head over to you very quickly? Just tell me a bit more about your role at the moment then. So how's the teamwork there?
How's the teamwork there? So we have a talent acquisition team. That do general recruitment, and then with early careers it is just me at the moment. I have a colleague in America who supports me with the onboarding, because in America it's a lot more hardcore. She supports me with the background checks and the onboarding of my graduates in America, and I have one colleague in India who supports me as well with things in APAC. But in terms of the team, it is just me.
Oh, wow.
And I wish I could clone myself, believe me.
Okay, so we're going to set the scene now and focus on the degree apprenticeship side of things. Mark, could you explain to us exactly what the criteria and the funding scenario is when it comes to degree apprenticeships and how easy they are to access by employers?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'm going to talk, a lot of what I'm going to talk about actually applies across the board for all apprenticeships, and I'm going to sort of move towards degree apprenticeships. So in order for something to be an apprenticeship, it has to be delivered against an apprenticeship standard. I seems facile, but that's the way it is. Apprenticeship standards are developed by my favourite piece of 21st century doublespeak, a trailblazer group. Which, if you want to call a committee something, call it a trailblazer. It sounds really dynamic, doesn't it? It's going to happen really quickly. They're not that quick. It's a committee, but they are pretty accurate. And so what the Trailblazer Group does is they identify where there are shortages within industry, say quantity surveying or software engineering, and they bring together a kind of group of experts, some blue chip companies, some small employers, a couple of education providers, and they develop this apprenticeship standard. And within the standard is described the person that the apprenticeship is going to generate in terms of knowledge, skills and behaviours. So it's like a person spec that they all kind of very crudely get their job descriptions out and say, right, how would you recognise a graduate quantity surveyor in terms of knowledge, skills and behaviours? And these are all charted out. They say, on our job description it says they've got to be able to communicate with clients, and on ours it says, they've got to understand this technical part of the role. And that becomes this description. And our apprenticeship programs, or any apprenticeship program, has to be delivered against a standard. So we write or adapt a program that, when studied alongside being in work in a relevant role, by the end of it, we will be able to generate enough evidence, or the apprentice will be able to generate enough evidence to have something against each item of the knowledge, skills and behaviours listed in that apprenticeship standard. So for me, and particularly within degree apprenticeships, obviously I'm biased, but they're way better than a regular degree, because not only is the candidate getting a bachelor's degree, a Bachelor of Arts or Bachelor of Science degree, they, by the end of it, have a portfolio of evidence that shows that not only can they answer questions about how they would do the job in the academic sense, but they can actually do the job, and they have the evidence to prove it within their portfolio. And in order to complete the apprenticeship, not only do they have to pass all the modules that make up the degree, so the degree is 360 credits of higher study covering levels 4, 5 and 6, but they also have to pass what's called an endpoint assessment, through which they're assessed to whether or not they have the evidence. It's kind of like a mini Viva for an undergraduate degree. You actually have to prove that you can do it, as well as answer an assignment about how you might do it. So that's what an apprenticeship is. We have, as I say, a range of degree apprenticeship programs. The clue's in the title. It's a degree and it's an apprenticeship, because it's that higher level study associated with the generation of evidence that allows you to demonstrate you can do the job. In terms of funding, there's 3 core ways that that an employer might pay for an apprenticeship, and frankly all of them are quite good value. So first and foremost, if you're a large employer, and by that I mean if your wage bill is in excess of £3 million per year in the UK, then you will be paying the apprenticeship levy, a tax on your wage bill, tallied at 0.5% of your salary bill in excess of £3 million. So your first £3 million is free. Everything after that, you pay 0.5% back to the Exchequer. The Exchequer tops it up by 10% and turns it into a voucher that they put into your digital account. And those vouchers can only be used to pay for apprenticeship training. So in basic terms, it's a tax rebate that pays for your apprenticeship training, because if you don't use it, you lose it. It's 24 months validity on the voucher that you get back. And once it's gone, it's gone. It folds back into the Exchequer, and the government spend it on something else that they think is useful. So that's the main one for big businesses. For small employers, there's 2 routes to this. So you're very lucky to have ARU on your doorstep. We got the 2nd largest grant in the UK for non-levy paying employers. Not all providers have this, but if you come through ARU, we have access to what's called co-investment. So if you don't pay the apprenticeship levy, you will be billed for 5% of the cost of the course, and we draw the rest of the funding directly from the Skills Funding Agency on your behalf. My most expensive degree apprenticeship for a non-levy payer is £1,350. And for that, you would be getting a BSc honours degree in civil engineering and your membership of the Institution of Civil Engineers, or potentially surveying and membership of the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors. So pretty good value. £27,000 book price, you pay £1,350. And then I mentioned 3 the other way around this, and this depends a little bit more on your location, because this is done locally, often through the local education partnerships in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. It's done through the Greater Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Partnership, GCCP. But they have a levy transfer program, so they have someone who's going around tapping up the big businesses who pay levy, who can't spend all of their vouchers in time, and asking them to donate them to a central pot, and then they're redistributing them to small employers. So you could even get the £1,350 waived by accessing a levy transfer from a large employer. And that's not to mention the fact that if you recruit someone between now and January, that potentially if they're under 25, there's another £2,000 coming to you from the Exchequer, £1,500 for people over 25. So yeah,
it's worth saying, if I might jump in,
please
that
go.
there are large employers in Cambridge who don't take on apprentices at all. I've been targeting them for years. You know, every time I meet people in their HR teams at events or whatnot, I say to them, why on earth are you not taking on apprentices? I don't understand. And some large employers just decide not to do, because it is very different taking on an apprentice, even a degree apprentice who would be, you know, obviously older than a school leaver. It is a completely different kettle of fish than to taking on an experienced hire. So a lot of companies will just say, well, we don't want to deal with any of that. They don't want to employ a specialist like myself. And then they just forego all of their levy. And so it is quite common.
Yeah, absolutely. So we hope that the levy transfer guys manage to hoover that up to pass it on to the non-levy payers who want to make use of it. If I may just throw in one last point, because I think it then loops back quite conveniently to Charlotte, is that for my courses and for apprenticeships generally, anyone can be an apprentice. So I'm conscious that today we're talking about early talent. And often people tend to swing to thinking about school leavers for apprenticeships, but my oldest apprentice will have his 60th birthday in the year that he graduates. They are open to anyone, and they are also a way of retraining people, because within apprenticeships, it's the one of the few places that you can take a second degree and be funded for it. So my best qualified apprentice has a PhD and is doing a BSc honours degree. It just happens that his PhD is in medieval history and he's now a software engineer. So because there's no crossover, we're not training him in knowledge, skills or behaviours that he already has from prior study. It's a legitimate thing for him to enter into a different pathway and be trained for that. Early talent, I think we're going to find, doesn't necessarily just come from school. There are other routes to it as well.
Absolutely, yeah. Age definitely shouldn't be a barrier. And we're going to be talking about upskilling and career changing later on. So yeah, we'll definitely address those points, because that's really valid. Okay, thanks for that, Mark. That was actually really insightful. So our next section is over with Charlotte. And Charlotte's going to be talking about what AVEVA offer their early careers and what programs, placement schemes they have available. So Charlotte, over to you.
So we have, in terms of graduates, we have a technical graduate program that actually is being paused this year. But that takes on graduates and turns them into software developers, although we're looking more towards cloud moving forward. So there may be a bit of a shift in terms of what we're doing there. Currently, I'm recruiting 30 people globally for our sales program. Unfortunately, none in the UK, but in the US, Dubai, Russia, France, Japan, Korea, China, I'm taking on graduates and putting them on a sales program. So there's that. We also have specialist graduate programs in India as well, because things run a lot differently in India. Then for school leavers, we have our apprenticeship program. We also have a few degree apprentices. Now, I was saying in our when we were chatting last week, I forgot to say, degree apprenticeships do exist, and we use ARU as our preferred supply for those. I had somebody actually contact me in reply to when I was talking about this event, and was asking about degree apprenticeships. And she was saying that her daughter is moving into sixth form and isn't sure what to do, and she would prefer to have a degree apprenticeship. I would say from an employer's point of view, a degree apprenticeship takes, correct me if I'm wrong, Mark, about 5-6 years to complete. That's around that time, depending on what it is, 4 or 5 years. As an employer, and especially if it's a young person coming into their first job, I think I would much prefer for people to come on to level 3 apprenticeships or level 4 apprenticeships, which are shorter, maybe 15 months or so, 18 months. And then it's just make sure that the young person enjoys that role, make sure it's the right fit for them, and make sure that they enjoy us as a company and that they are happy with us, and then switch them up afterwards and put them onto a degree apprenticeship. We've got currently 4 apprentices of that nature in AVEVA right now, and all of them did level 3s or level 4s first. Then we put them up. And then we have, all of the other things like placements and internships and work experience. Hopefully, I want to try and get for the October half term. I would really like to have a remote work experience for local schools in the area. Just, trying to arrange all of these things in the current climate is a lot more tricky. So, yeah, if I'm going to do something, I want to make sure it's done right. So I don't ever want to do anything willy-nilly, especially with young people. It's so important to get it right.
Absolutely. So what kind of process do your early careers roles entail in terms of the interview process and application process?
So this is something that I'm actually looking into transforming right now. The thing is, you have and this is in general, you usually have somebody in an early careers position such as myself, and backgrounds such as Mark and myself, where we know about inequality, we know about diversity issues, we know about all of that, but that isn't necessarily you could have the happiest, friendliest, most wonderful company in the world, and maybe you would still have managers with unconscious bias, or who don't have the understanding and the training that we do about the next generation. So I'm looking into transforming our whole process and making it more equal. There's a couple of tools on the market that digitize the whole process. And I'm looking at one right now. It's quite interesting. It's quite exciting. It has a digital assessment day. And so every part of it, apart from the interview, will be blind. So when the managers get the CVs, they'll be blind. When they get the writing tasks or the tests or whatever we're including, it won't have the name of the candidate or any details about the candidate. And it's interesting. I can't remember if I spoke to you about this last week, but I said to my colleague in India, I've got this amazing program. It's so good, and it makes it all really equal and blind, and like it's going to be so good. It's going to be transformative. And he said, oh, I've got a really good competitive product. It's really good because when they're taking the test, it takes photos of them every 5 minutes. And I said, well, that's the complete opposite of what I want. Why would I want that? And he said, well, it's really common in India for people to pay people to take tests for them. So just so that you can check that no one's playing switcheroo while you're not looking, they take photos of them. So that, when you're working on a global level, I want it to be as equal as possible. I want it to be as appropriate and as accessible as possible. But it also have to take into consideration regional differences and cultural differences as well. So it is quite challenging to get it right.
Yeah, that sounds like a very large got that on your hands, Charlotte.
I'll find a way. It'll be, yeah. Sometimes you just have to be flexible with things, and just, flexibility is key.
Excellent. Okay, so moving on, I wondered, Charlotte, are there any, and I'm sure there's many, but are there any sort of case studies that spring to mind in terms of people that have done either work experience placements or apprenticeships with you that have gone on to progress throughout AVEVA?
So we have, and actually I didn't go back and ask him permission, so I won't mention his name, but we do have a chap who started out as an apprentice, I believe, in business, and now he works in our comms team. No, I use him quite heavily because whenever I want to win a manager around, if a manager's saying to me, I want to raise a headcount and hire a new person, and I want to have the conversation of, I think that this should be an early careers option instead of an experienced option, and just get them to be more open. I always use this guy as an example. Say, look, so-and-so, you know, started off as an apprentice, is doing so well. You know, I would really love to have the same opportunity for this new person in your team. And we have quite a few apprentices. A lot of them are finishing off now, and we're just moving into our next sort of batch, our next cohort of apprentices. In terms of graduates, and again, I haven't asked their permission, so I won't mention their name, but we have a lot of really, really good graduates, especially within our tech program. And one in particular, she's actually been hired by she's been poached by a different manager before the graduate program is even finished. He came to me and said, look, I've got this project going on. I want this graduate. She's really, you know, no matter what you're doing, she's got her eyes on the prize. She knows exactly what she's doing, and she's going to go so far, and I know it. So that, you know, it's, by and large, and there are statistics, I can't remember off the top of my head, but by and large, an apprentice tends to stay more loyal in a company, especially if you take them on at a lower, like a school leaver age. They tend to stay longer in a company than a graduate. Graduates tend to want to jump every couple of years and sort of jump up. And so you do have to sort of keep your finger on the pulse as to what young people are asking. A really good resource for this is Deloitte do an annual millennial survey. Okay. And it's half millennials and half Generation Z. And I use it every single year, no matter what I'm doing. And it's a global survey. Thousands upon thousands of young people complete it. But it tells you exactly what they want. You know, of course, the best place to ask is your own young people in your company, and to, you know, ask them what is it that motivates you, and make sure you're incorporating that. But it's really good information if you're coming in from zero.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, also in terms of the stage people are at when they're going to be applying for jobs, obviously they potentially could be older. But if they have just left school or done their A-levels, they're at a point where the world of work, applying for jobs, interviewing is all very new. So how do you, in terms of the interview process, I guess make them feel comfortable, and what does that interview process entail? Do you do tests, or is it more based on their personality? Mm-hmm.
So it's a combination of, so I will always screen the candidate first, and even though I'm a massive softie and I'll give anyone a chance, if I could give all of them jobs, I genuinely would. But I've worked with young people for a very long time now. I know if they're playing a fast one on me. So I'm usually quite a good, strict first round interviewer. Then I'll pass it on to the manager, and then they would, you know, ask more technical things, maybe incorporate some writing tests. It depends on what it is, to be honest. You said something, hold on, I've thought I was going to say something. Hold on, could you repeat the question? Because there's an element of it I thought, oh, I'll talk about that, but I've completely, I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. I was just saying about, you know, at the start of the process when...
Yes. Go on. Got it, remembered it. So I very strongly believe in so for example, when you email, if you're doing a graduate program, for example, if you're emailing a graduate saying, you know, you've been selected to go to the first stage interview, or even like there's an interview stage we had around where they had to give presentations and so on. I strongly believe in giving them advice in that email. So I will say to all of them, look, these are the panelists, these are their job titles, maybe link them to LinkedIn, maybe say, you know, feel free to have a look at them on LinkedIn. This is what they're going to be looking for. This is how you're going to succeed. You know, when we had our conversation last week, I really thought that you were really good in this area. I want for you to be able to confidently explain that to this person. Don't be scared, don't be nervous. Talk to them about how we talked about this. And then when you're giving the presentation, for example, send them your company's slides, send them the template so that they don't have to worry about design or color scheme or anything like that. They just focus on what they're doing. And then I say to them, you know, just top tip from Charlotte, don't put too much text on each slide, just do a couple of bullet points. And they don't want to know about, you know, what's written on the slides. They want to know how confidently you can present ideas. So just focus on that. That's what they're looking for. And the reason why I do that is, first of all, I want for them to succeed. I want for everyone to be doing the best that they can possibly be. I want for it all to be equal. You don't know if these people have people at home giving them this type of advice. Not everyone's lucky enough to have that. And also, if they're not successful, then they leave the process with something. You know, maybe I'm the first person to, you know, that's not an egotistical thing to say, hopefully, but maybe I'm the first person to ever give them that type of advice, or to tell them how to do interviews. So even if they're not successful, they leave with something to take away.
I think that's the thing, you know, at that point, whatever stage you're at in life, you're applying for a job, and that advice should be, you know, welcomed, and you're wanting to create a great first impression of your business. So, you know, why not give them that information and assist them and getting them to do the best possible job? They would be at the first point of interview, maybe.
We always say to candidates, you know, when we teach people about interviews, and on LinkedIn there's quite a lot of it about how, you know, stories, sometimes I feel that they're fabricated, but a story of somebody going on to an interview and maybe they meet someone on the train and they're rude to someone on the train and it turns out to be the interviewer, or they go into the reception of the office and they're really rude to the receptionist, and then the manager comes down and asks the receptionist, what did you think of so-and-so? And they're like, well, they're rude, and then they didn't get the job. I think the opposite is true as well. At every point when that candidate is, even if from the bat you know that they're not going to be successful, there is no reason for them to not have a good experience. And that doesn't mean, again, on LinkedIn right now, there's a lot of recruiter bashing about how, you know, maybe they have a template rejection or something like that. I currently have 30 vacancies open. On some of them, so my Dubai ones, I've got 4 in Dubai. Each of my Dubai ones has 1,000 applicants, and we don't have a very fancy system that will sift through it for me. We have no algorithms. I don't really believe in the whole algorithm thing anyway, but there is no way on earth that I'm going to be able to give each one a personalized reply. So there will be some sort of, you know, template or some sort of systemized way to reply to them. But regardless, they're all going to get a good experience, hopefully, from interacting with us.
I wonder if I can offer a take on sort of the other side of that, because I mean, we've just been through A-level results, and actually I see the output of the work that people like Charlotte do in the sense of, I'm looking at applications from people to the courses, because for a degree apprenticeship we have entry requirements. It's still a university degree, but I think people need to understand that whilst we would always prefer for an employer to send us candidates who meet the entry requirements, that's just because it's easier for us, because if they meet the entry requirements, we know automatically that we can get them through the course, and therefore we can turn an offer around really quickly. If they don't meet the entry requirements, that may not be a problem, because we still assess all applicants on merit, and part of that is the context of their employer and their own context. The only thing that we have any kind of particular difficulty about is level 2 English and maths, level 2 literacy and numeracy, because it's tied to the funding rules. So it's a requirement that we're not wholly in control of. Every other entry requirement we're wholly in control of, and it's a matter of judgment. And I've seen with another large employer this year, who clearly has a quite a progressive mindset around how they're going to use apprenticeships to drive diversity within their business, sending us some you know, let's say marginal candidates in terms of grades, but that we trust their talent acquisition. If they're saying, look, this person, we know they're marginal on their A-level grades, but we see them as a diamond in the rough, and they've shown something to us through that recruitment process. If we can get a half decent personal statement out of them and a reference from the employer, we're gonna consider them seriously, at least. I mean, you know, the reason we have entry requirements is to prevent us setting people up to fail. And when we're working in partnership with an employer, part of the responsibility for making sure people aren't failing is also within that recruitment process, as well as our admissions. So it is very much a partnership to try and find the right candidate there.
And you're looking at upskilling, so you can use apprenticeships and degree apprenticeships to upskill your current staff. So I know that we touched upon before that it doesn't just have to be young people. Yes. So we're going through a process right now in AVEVA. We have, you know, we've divvied up what we have in our levy pot. I have a section to use for young people. I have a section, I'm going to create a returnee-ship, which I think that we're going to talk about maybe a little bit. And then I have a section for upskilling current staff. We've put that out to the business. People have sent applications in to say, what would they like to study and why, and, justify and so on. My next step is that I will match them up with providers such as ARU, and I will set them up with meetings with Marc so that Marc can just see, what do you do in your job? What's your job description? Are you able to complete? Because, as apprenticeship providers, you would get penalised if somebody isn't able to complete, and there's statistics and all that stuff, and we would never want to force someone into an apprenticeship that we don't think would succeed. Firstly, for the apprentice, that's not a pleasant experience to go through, but also out of respect for the providers, to make sure that there is going to be success on all fronts.
Mm. And talk to me a bit about how it works in terms of the ease of, I guess, getting set up as an employer, Marc, if you don't mind. What is that process like, and how does it work from a point where a company says to you, okay, yes, we've got a gap for 5 apprentices. What actually happens then?
Well, a couple of different things happen. So we could be approached and have people who say, well, we've got a candidate, can we make an application? I do actually work kind of further down the line than that, if you will, that I will speak to employers who are like, yes, we're generally interested in bringing in an apprentice, but we just don't know where to start. And the work that I do, I also help with promoting vacancies for all employers, so I can put adverts on the National Find an Apprenticeship website, and that we use a little bit of marketing budget to promote those and drive traffic back to employers. So I always like it when I get a big employer that tells me to turn the advert off because they've had too many applications. It's quite a popular way of finding that. So we talk through it very much depends on the course. So some of the courses, say for instance something like Chartered Manager, is in a sense more generic. The course is a business management course, and it's a lot easier to come up with ways of adapting an individual's experience within an organization to meet the needs of the course, if you will, because I talked about the apprenticeship standard and the requirement to generate evidence. One of the things that we've done across all of our courses is that we have mapped every aspect of the academic part of the course against the knowledge, skills and behaviours of the apprenticeship standard. So in theory, and I wouldn't recommend it, but in theory, someone could do our programme almost entirely in the abstract, do the degree, and use the evidence that they generated by doing the assignments for the degree as their evidence for their knowledge, skills and behaviours. But I wouldn't recommend it because there's no value to an employer in that. The whole point for me about a degree apprenticeship is that you get a graduate of your organisation, not of our university. So wherever possible, if they're using their own experience from work to evidence the knowledge, skills and behaviours, every time they do that, that's a little bit more credit to you as an organisation. So I'll be working through with an employer to try and ascertain that. I say management's an example of a relatively easy fit one. You look at something like civil engineering or chartered surveyor, particularly for the quantity surveyors, because it's tied with a very specific professional qualification. They get their membership at the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors as a RICS, or become an incorporated engineer through the ICE with civil engineering. And that has a very particular subset of requirements around the way that they're supervised, the nature of the role that they're in and the activity that they're engaged in through their job. And so there's a little bit more kind of due diligence that I have to go through with an employer to make sure that they are in a position to actually be able to engage with the apprenticeship properly. And as Charlotte says, we're not setting the candidate up to fail on a course that the employer can't provide the necessary framework for them to succeed within. So we set up, there's 3 contracts that support an apprenticeship. So the main one that we work through is called the written agreement. That's the provider contract. So that's between ARU or your provider and the employer. That's the contract for provision of a programme. You need an apprenticeship agreement, which in basic terms is the apprentice's employment contract. We tend to use a cover sheet. So what we would generally advise is use your kind of standard, you're a trainee, or if they're an existing staff, they stay on their contract, and you have a cover sheet that both the employer and the apprentice sign, and it makes the contract apprenticeship compliant, if you will. So that just means, like, for instance, any clauses that are in the contract that aren't aligned with the funding rules in particular. That's the thing that most of the contract is there to make sure we all adhere to the funding rules. That would nullify that. So, for instance, the obvious one would be if you've got clawback clauses for the price of training, it can't apply to an apprenticeship because the funding rules say that an apprentice can't be made to pay for their apprenticeship. So it would just invalidate that clause against the cost of the apprenticeship. So we have that. And then finally, there's the commitment statement, and that's signed by all three parties. So we sign it to say we'll provide a course. The employer signs it to say they'll give the apprentice what they're due, so they are eligible for time, contracted time, paid time to do their training, and to have the support that they need. And the apprentice signs it and says that they'll be a good learner and turn up for their classes and do their work, and so on and so forth. So a lot of what I'm doing is just working people through that process. They're either starting a long way back, which is we need to recruit someone, how do we do that, and how do we design that role into our organisation. So you might be thinking about, this is a gateway to a graduate programme. You've got an internal pipeline to your graduate programme with that. Or for small employers, it might just simply be, how do we keep hold of them and develop them within the business past the end of the programme?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. Nikki's just asked, is there a limit to the number of existing employees you can put onto an apprenticeship?
Nope.
As long as you've got, if you're a levy payer, as long as there's money in your pot, then that's fine. Well, but remember that the salary for your apprentice can't come from the pot, so that you pay the salary for your apprentice and you raise the head count or whatever, but it's only the training funding comes from the levy pot.
But if the levy pot is spent, you move into co-investment anyway. So I always say, if your levy pot was hypothetically the value of one apprentice, take two, because that second one is virtually free. You've essentially halved your per head cost of your apprentices. Co-investment for the next one, kind of thing. So I've spoken to big employers in the kind of built environment and construction sector who had identified as an opportunity. They were looking to spend their entire levy pot on their trade apprentices, and then essentially have the government pay for all of their degree level qualifications. They thought that they could spend their pots just on their level 3, their craft trades, and that they would then therefore essentially only be paying 5% for everything else, and they were going to do all of their professional services through co-investment, having spent their pots basically.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks for that, Nikki. Hopefully that's answered your question. The other thing that I wanted to talk about, particularly when it comes to work experience, is it's fine to get someone on board, but it's actually about what you do with them whilst they're there, giving them, the variety of different departments, and making sure that there's a really good amount of planning that goes into it behind the scenes before they arrive. Can you talk to us a bit from your point of view, Charlotte, about how that works with you and the planning that goes in, it is involved in behind the scenes?
Sure. There's different ways you can go about it. You can, so first and foremost, and again, this is a personal thing, I believe that if you have a student and they're going to their parent's employer and they're following their parent around for the week, I don't think that that's going to be a good experience, and that young person isn't going to get that growth opportunity that they would probably need. So even if you're taking on one of your employees, offspring, whatever, for the week or so, please try to get them to be assigned to somebody else, because it helps them grow. One of the biggest things, employers say that young people aren't ready for the workplace, and one of the biggest things is that they don't have very good experience in working with different types of people, and also working with people that they don't necessarily like. But actually, at school, when you say, okay, make a group of 4, work with a partner, you pick the people that you like. Whereas you come into the workplace and your manager says, okay, I want you to do a project with so-and-so. You're like, oh, do I have to really work with so-and-so? You have to work with people. So from an early age, working with somebody who you don't know and learning how to manage that relationship is really important. You can go about it in different ways. So I really like how Mott MacDonald has, and I don't know if they still do this, they used to. They used to have a special project. So they're not actually assigned to any particular manager or anything. They take on a large number, let's say 8 of them. They set them a task for the week, and it's the same task that they run every year, has different elements of the skills that they're looking for, and then they present at the end of the week. And I really like this because you're not, in terms of time spent by the manager, it's actually quite easy going. You're not having, a 15-year-old sat next to you for 2 weeks. And also it gives them a chance to express those skills, the presentation skills, the managing relationship skills, working with people from other schools, for example. So I do quite like that. We do the sort of like assigning to a person type thing. That's something, again, I'd like to look into transforming as we come into the next academic year. And I would really like to look into different ways to do this. And somebody to follow if you are looking to take on work experience students, there's a lady called Helen Clements who works for Morgan Sindall. She is an excellent resource. She's based up in Woodbridge, but she pretty much covers the whole of East Anglia with things with young people. If you follow her on LinkedIn, she has excellent advice and excellent resources about work experience. She does it really, really well. And I believe that she does the Mott MacDonald style where you're actually setting them a project. I think it is the way forward with these things.
Yeah, excellent. Okay. The other thing to touch on is when employers are recruiting early careers, are their expectations too high of what to expect from those people at that level, potentially?
It depends. And when I'm working with managers within our business, so for example, I'm setting up right now a global apprenticeship program. So I have we have our apprentices in the UK already, but we're taking on, we're being trailblazers, there you go, Mark. We're being trailblazers in the US and starting off. Apprentices don't really happen in the US, but we're making it happen. And then in India, we're creating a program that looks like an apprenticeship program. It isn't a true apprenticeship program because they don't exist there. And so and then they'll join up with our UK apprentices. When I'm doing this program, I'm setting something up from scratch. I will look into the business. Who are the managers who are on the ball with these things? You have to be really mindful because even if you have a really great manager who's very experienced and knows what they're doing and they've hired loads of people, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be great for young people. You have to have that. I don't even know how to describe it, but there is a sort of special sauce with managers who are good at early careers, who will understand that you're not going to get the finished article, who will understand that you're going to have that loose fit. Maybe they're not going to have the exact qualifications and the grades that you're looking for, but actually it's looking for those diamonds in the rough and giving someone a chance. And from a business point of view, if you're looking to go back into your business and sell the idea of early careers, you actually save a lot of money by taking on apprentices and training them up and getting them to be loyal and bringing them up through the company. But in order to do that, you need to find those diamonds in the rough. And it's finding the right managers. That's the key to that.
And also about the application process, I was wondering, the sheer volume of applications you're getting is incredible. Yeah. And obviously, as you said, the personalised approach cannot work in that situation. But if someone reached out to you on LinkedIn, or they thought of a more creative way to apply or approach to find out more, how do you feel about that? Is that a good thing, not so good thing? Would you rather they followed the right process?
So in terms of contacting you on LinkedIn, it's sort of hit and miss, I would say. Me personally, I would like for applicants to follow the process because we have so many of them. I don't want for anyone to get missed out. And also that's sort of my social media. I use that for work, of course, but it's sort of, I don't know, someone wouldn't send me their CV over Facebook. So I don't, I'd rather not get the CV over LinkedIn. However, in the application, so right now, like I said, I'm recruiting in Russia. In Russia, they don't use LinkedIn. It's actually blocked there. They don't use Indeed. So I've had to use their versions of those sites. And there's one called headhunter.ru that I've been using. And I actually, just before this webinar started, I got a new application through, and all it was a link. He was like, I'm really interested in your job. Here's a link, here's a YouTube link where I explain further. So I clicked it, and there he is, stood in front of me, explaining to me why he wants this job. And I can, I can see his communication skills, I can see his confidence. He's professional, he's got like a little, a microphone clipped to him and stuff like that. And actually the HR person in Russia has been pinging me while we're talking, saying that he really, really wants to speak to this person because he's gone above and beyond and he's done something completely different. And I love that stuff. I love that kind of thing.
Goes a long way to show someone's enthusiasm, commitment, all of that kind of thing. So yeah, that's great. Very interesting that you got that just before the webinar.
Literally I'm not even lying. It's literally just 10 minutes before I clicked on it. I was like, okay, that sounds good.
The other thing that we're going to focus on is upskilling. And we're also going to talk on returnships. Mark, can I head over to you? What is your thoughts around those?
Yeah, I think that apprenticeships provide a really good opportunity for both, for upskilling and returnships. I was really kind of awakened to the notion of returnships when I came into dealing with apprenticeships. Literally got a call from someone who I'm phoning because I'm just coming back off maternity leave. I'm actually qualified as a social worker, but actually on reflection, don't get me wrong, I quite like being a social worker, but it was never what I really wanted to do. I just sort of ended up being here, and I really want to be a software engineer, and I've seen your digital and technology solutions program, and I just wondered whether I'd be allowed to do it because I already have a degree. And the answer was, well, yes, you could, because you don't know anything about software engineering at the moment. So, there's that crossover, as I mentioned earlier, my doctor of medieval history, that it is a place where people can do a second degree. You can retrain people. And I think it provides an interesting counterpoint. I mean, probably less so for the big employers. I think that they would fit returnships in their own pocket and still have early careers and their graduate intake and things like that. But potentially for a smaller employer who might be a little bit nervous about having a young person in the business and having to do the kind of paternalistic bit that might be seen to go with bringing in a school leaver into your business, the kind of, oh my God, and we saw it, sorry, a slight aside, we did see this in the first year, that we did some mentor training for everybody. And one of the mentors turned around and went, oh God, we just got made to feel so old this week because we finished our first week, and Apprentice X turned round to us and said, right then, where do we go out in Cambridge on a Friday night? And everyone went, I haven't been out in Cambridge, let alone on a Friday night, for years. What are you on about? And so there was that sort of like awakening of like, oh my God, we've actually got a young person in the office who like does stuff and wants to kind of get engaged with their experience and stuff. And if that's a problem for you as an employer, then a returnship might actually provide a slightly more comfortable landing into getting into apprenticeships, because what you maybe don't have, if you're looking at a young starter, say you're looking at a software engineer, you're probably looking at someone who's, taken their old man's hi-fi apart and automated the house with a Raspberry Pi, or built a website, or whatever it is. And you're looking for those, those cues that they're going to be the right person for the job. Whereas if you're looking at a returnship, you might not be getting that. I don't think that a social worker who's been on maternity leave has had a lot of time to tinker with a Raspberry Pi particularly. But what you get in return is someone who knows their way around an office, is already coached in the world of work, that understands how to deal with people, all of those sorts of things. So, you've got a kind of 6 and 2 3s balance there between someone who might bring a burgeoning subject specialism with them and be easy to integrate into the work itself, the actual project, but might need a little bit more hand-holding in terms of their journey into the world of work, against someone who, is a ready-made inhabitant of the world of work, but doesn't know their Raspberry Pi from their BBC Micro or whatever it is, kind of thing. So there's an interesting balance to be played off there, but I think there's certainly value to be had within that area as well.
Definitely. And upskilling for you, Charlotte?
Yeah, so I'm going to, this is hot off the press. It hasn't even been on the press, but I'm hoping to create a returningship for the new year.
Wow.
And when I sold it to the business, I just said, this fits in with our values. It's a good thing to do. And the sort of format for it is essentially offcuts from what I'm doing anyway, because they're still the apprenticeship programs that I'm putting on anyway. What I'm hoping to do is, let's say for argument's sake that I'll take on 6 people. That's what I hope. Whether I'll get approval for all 6, or maybe I'll get approval for 10. We never know. Let's say we've got 6. I want to have 3 of them to be people who have been out of work. All of them are going to be out of work for maybe 3 to 5 years. Maybe they worked in something else, like the social worker example, and I put them onto apprenticeships and we retrain them into whatever it is that they're going to do. And then the other half, the other 3, are going to be people who did used to do tech jobs. And again, they've been out of the workplace for 3 to 5 years. Maybe they still have those skills and that knowledge in there, but they just don't have the confidence to be able to bring it in, to be able to hit send on an application or something like that. And have them together on the same program. Around that, have lots of learning development opportunities, confidence classes. I've been running confidence classes and webinars and things for people for years. So bringing those elements to the table as well. Teaching them things on, how to sound more confident in an email. I was listening to a podcast this morning about if you say sorry a lot in the email, so sorry I was late, instead of saying that, say thank you for your patience, and it presents yourself in a much more confident way. So teaching them these types of things and bringing them all together, and hopefully they'll play off each other, hopefully they'll learn from each other. But yeah, I'm really excited about it. And I want to make sure that it's done right. I want to make sure that they have all of this support available as well, and that we assign them to the right kinds of managers that are going to be nurturing and forgiving for them to be loose fits at the start.
Amazing. That sounds absolutely brilliant. And what an opportunity.
I hope so. I hope that there are some really good case studies out there. A lot of the banks do this type of thing. And I believe that Amazon as well maybe does this kind of thing as well. But I really think that it should be more common. There's a lot of really excellent people out there who are out of work for absolutely no reason other than employers' expectations are too high, and they're looking for someone who's shaped like a diamond, and someone that's shaped like a square instead. It's not okay, and there needs to be more routes into the workplace at a sort of midway level.
And are there any, this is for both of you actually, I don't know if there was any kind of barriers or misconceptions that you hear of in terms of why employers, I'm just going back to your point at the start, Charlotte, where you were saying, it's quite common for employers not to be taking on apprentices. And now I'm just thinking, what would be the misconception or the barrier there that might be stopping them? I don't know whether either of you could offer any insight on that.
I don't know. I've not really. The people who have those misconceptions aren't usually the people who are working in conjunction with me. So I don't really come across them myself. Maybe Mark has more examples of them, but for us, it's
maybe it's a cost. Do you think it's a cost thing, or do you think it's well out there that that it's going to cost quite a bit, or
more cost of time? So you need to let that person grow into. I'm training a very junior person up right now, and when you are training someone junior up, it is very time intensive. You can't just let them run with things. They're pinging you all the time to try and get approval for things and to double check that they've got it right. And so it is very time intensive. But I think it's just allowing managers to relax into that sort of relationship, and you can't just give someone a task and let them sort it out by themselves. That's the barrier that I would say. Maybe Mark has something different.
Sorry, I've got my daughter knocking on the door. I'm just telling her to go away. To be honest, and to be completely blunt, I mean, part of the reason that I'm here is to try and find out the answer to that. Because I'm hoping that if there's any people who are in that position and who are sitting in that attendee list at the moment will reach out to me and tell me what it is that's blocking them from doing it, because once we've got over that, then I can help them to do it. But if I don't know what the reason is, then I can't help them with it. So I don't think there's a single reason. I did want to loop back to something that just because Charlotte's mentioned the cost of time, and in a sense it also speaks to Nikki's question that whilst there is technically no limit to the number of existing employees you can put on an apprenticeship, one of the rules of apprenticeships is that you are obliged to give an apprentice a minimum of 20% of their contracted hours across the duration of the apprenticeship to commit to their studies in what's called off-the-job training. A lot of people shorthand it to a day a week because a fifth's a simple sum. It's not a day a week, it's 20% of their contracted hours, and it is a minimum. But yeah, if you were to put your entire payroll on an apprenticeship, then you're losing 20% of your labour force, and that's why as part of the setup for an apprenticeship, it's important to understand the need for a mentor and how you extract value from mentoring your apprentices, and why it's not an ideal situation that you base all the knowledge, skills and behaviours on the activity within the course, because part of the way that you get value out of that 20% time is making sure that they're working on stuff that informs their assignment that is also of value to your organisation. So whilst there's no technical limit, there may be a practical limit in terms of the amount of time that you can spare your people for.
Okay, thank you. Just to remind everyone, if you have got a question, we are coming to the end of our session, so please do ask away. It's been great chatting to you, and to end, we always do finish with a top takeaway. So if I can head over to Mark.
Good, thank you, because I just thought, oh poo, I forgot to think of one.
So top takeaway from today's session for those that are watching, Mark.
Top takeaway. I mean, I've had this takeaway for a while, but it's to recognise that there's some fabulous practice in terms of recruitment, and the movement towards employers understanding the need to diversify their workforce and the value that they get from it. And I guess for me, what I'd like people to take away is that the partnership that you can strike with an education provider, and I'd love it to be ARU, in order to develop a program that fits your business, is something that everyone ought to consider, because I think it's a real value add to what you do and how you grow your business.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mark. Charlotte?
So moving on from that, actually, and it does link in, so that's good. I think my takeaway is, if you are thinking of taking on young people, then the sort of network around that is incredibly friendly. I've known Mark for years and years and years, and no matter what role I've been in, he's always been open to me asking questions and learning more. He does an insane amount of speaking gigs. He's always everywhere. So, just learning from the people within this field. And again, with me, feel free to ask questions. I really don't mind people. I think that if you're in straight up experienced recruitment, if you're a recruiter or a TA in a company, it's sort of secrecy, and I can't tell you things because you might steal my candidates, or you might steal our processes. In early careers, it's not like that, because we're really open. We want for the people that we work with to get jobs. We're really, not that doesn't happen in you know what I mean. It's really open, it's really friendly, and we have a couple of really great people within Cambridge who work in these areas. There's also on LinkedIn an early careers forum, which is a group there, which is really great as well for asking questions. It's a little bit empty right now because unfortunately a lot of people in early careers have been made redundant in the pandemic. But regardless, there are a lot of really great open people who are willing to share advice and guidance and stuff, so please just, like the Helen Clemences and
yes.
and so on.
Yeah. Are there any, I was going to say, just quickly, Mark, the site that you said that you advertise the vacancies on,
yes,
What was that again?
It's the National Apprenticeship Service. If you Google find an apprenticeship, it's literally, it's like findanapprenticeship.gov.uk or something like that. Sorry, I haven't committed it to memory, but yeah. And what I have, if people are interested in using that, because it's a government site, I have to put something in every box or it doesn't let me submit it. So I've got a simple Word document that's got all of the fields from the website in a Word document. And actually, if you've not got a kind of like heavily organized, corporate recruitment function, it's quite a good way of actually just putting a job description together, because that's basically how the advert shapes up. And we can talk about that, because it kind of feeds back to what Charlotte was saying about giving good advice to people. Like, there are a lot of first-time applicants coming through there, so the more helpful, the better the vision that you can give of what the role actually is in that advert, the more likely you are to get an appropriate candidate back through it. So we can work on that. But yeah.
I guess from my point of view, with my background, and what I have seen is over the years, the number of people that we help who are in summer holidays and from university, and that then go on to get really good graduate scheme placements the following year. That temp experience really is quite helpful in terms of adding something to their CV, even if it's only that short window that they're back. So if you are at a point where you are hiring, do consider temporary workers that are more at a student level, because it can really help gain those skills on their CV, and they're also very good. So why not?
I think it's a relatively low risk way to try before you buy, isn't it, in a sense? And you've got that ability to just spot someone, have them in the office, get a feel for them, and then give them a tap on the shoulder and say, there's a vacancy coming up, we'd love for you to apply to it, kind of thing.
For sure. Okay, well, it has been great to chat. Just to give you a heads up on next week's episode, we are talking all things virtual hiring. And the following week, we're looking at planning and strategy for high volume recruitment campaigns. So if either of those subjects are of interest, the links will be available on our website.
I think I need to sign up to those.
Yes. And Charlotte, Mark, it's been wonderful to chat, and thank you so much for your time. So we will see you next week. But for the rest of you, have a great day. Speak to you soon.
Thanks for having me.
Bye.
Cheers, and see you soon.